Alright, so this is Andres back with a building video. So here I'm actually building the third of 4 shelves for the kitchen here at the village. It's a very basic shelf. As you'll see, I didn't take too much care to sand down the wood or give it any sort of super nice finish, as it's going to be covered in either some kind of paint or potentially a plastic covering to protect the wood from the food that is going to be in the restaurant. So I started off by doing almost all of my cuts. This is, like I said, the third shelf I had made of this exact style. And I've learned a little bit along the way of how to make it more efficient. My goal with this one was to make it as fast as I possibly could. It ended up taking me about an hour and 10 minutes total, a little bit of hiccups here and there. But yeah, like I said, started off with just all of the cuts. So I had 2 2-meter side panels, and then I had a bunch of 24-centimeter long blocks that are going to support the shelves. Reason for 24 centimeters is that was the width of all of these side panels and shelves. So I had 12 of those. 2 will be used for each shelf, so we have 6 shelves in total. Here I'm just pre-nailing those little blocks with just the nails ready to go. That way when I mark out the spots where they'll be going, I can just hammer them in. I don't have to fumble around with holding the nail in place and potentially smacking my finger. And here I'm just measuring out and then finally placing in those blocks at the separate increments. So I place the bottom block in first, and then I measure out my increments from there. They were 40 centimeters apart all the way. Last one being roughly 32 centimeters. But I just spaced out the 40s, and then whatever the last one was ended up being that. So here I'm finishing up the second one, and this to me was where I thought I hit my halfway point, but really this is only about 22 minutes in, but the second half took a lot longer than I expected. Again, I was trying to do this as fast as possible. So once I had those 2 side panels done and nailed in, I sent a screw through each of them. That way each shelf support is held together by 2 nails. That'll give it some strength and flexibility, and 1 screw to make sure it doesn't come out even just a tad bit. I found that that's a pretty good mix of screwing, like compression power, and nail flexibility power. So now that I've got both of those panels set up, I place them next to each other, and then I lay out my shelf boards next to it. So like I said, I have 6 of those. Each shelf board was cut to 100 centimeters. You'll see in a bit I made a small mistake. One of the shelf boards I should have made 105 centimeters for the top shelf. It would have just given the whole thing overall a bit more strength, and you'll see where I made that error in a sec. Here I'm just pre-screwing, just like I was doing with the pre-nailing, putting in those screws, 4 per shelf, 1 per corner. Just placing them in a little bit, that way I don't have to fumble around with getting the screw in place, and just that whole annoyance if you've tried screwing into an unpiloted hole before, you know what I mean? And so yeah, I screwed all those in, pre-screwed, and then the bottom one's the hardest one to get in. Once that one's in, then I place the next shelf about halfway up just to add some stability to the structure. It'll make the rest of the shelves easy rather than going one by one from the bottom. So once I had that one in, just blazed through the rest. This only took a couple minutes because all the screws are pre-screwed in. And then once I had that in, all that was left was the top panel. And like I said before, I should have cut this one to 105 centimeters, but I only cut it to 100 centimeters. So it didn't end up making it to the entire width of the top of the cabinet. It's just a tad bit short. So yeah, you'll see here that it's just a tad bit short. Small error. This is again the third of 4th shelves that I'm making, so I'll make one just like this. And right here is my absolute hands down favorite part of making any sort of furniture. And I know the work I'm doing with these is not extremely precise, but I do like to get precise with this. What I'm doing here is measuring the hypotenuse, the width, and the height of the cabinet to find what the actual hypotenuse should be. That's what I'm doing on my phone right there. Found out to be 227.5 centimeters. So I found a board here that was at least that length. It was plenty long. Cut it down to that width. Use my calculator again to find the angle. So you take the 202 height divided by the 105 width, put it into an inverse tangent, and you get the angle that you need. So I found that angle to be around 22.5. Actually, I had to do a little bit of different math there. I can explain in the description if anyone's curious. And here's why you should, be a little careful with what you're working. Luckily, there weren't any puppies. Where the cabinet fell, they probably would have ran away as they heard it falling anyway. But no puppies were harmed. The cabinet did fall, but it's all good. And then once I nailed that in, the entire shelf was squared off, which is great. And now the last part, which is a little tedious, but definitely worth it to make the shelf a bit more usable in a kitchen so things don't fall off the back end. Cut off panels that are all angled for the back side, and it's a little tedious, like I said, and I also pre-nailed all of these to make it easier to just give in the final nail in at the end. And that's about it. Again, it took about an hour and 10 minutes. I'm going to look to try to make it even more efficient for the last and final cabinet. Definitely want to go under an hour. I like playing around with this sort of fast building style, and I would highly recommend anyone considering building anything out there I know this is kind of an unpopular opinion, but try building something without having a fully structured out plan. I didn't draw any of this out. It was all in my head, and that's not to brag. I think that's actually a very useful skill to have. It's like, sure, you can practice with drawing things out and nailing it down correctly, but I think getting in reps of trying to build things just off of memory and thoughts on the fly really builds a very different skill set that you're not going to get from following, a DIY cabinet shelf thing online. I think you should definitely go that route, but also go the route where you think, look, I want to build a box. I'm not going to draw it out. I'm not going to write anything down. I'm going to try to keep it in my head as best as I can and see which one works better for you. And I think at the end of the day, you'll find that a mixture of both is going to work best for you, but you will gain a lot of skill with the on-the-fly method as well as the written out method. So hope you enjoyed this video. If you haven't subscribed already, would love for you to hit that subscribe button. I'm only at 350 subscribers now, but I like making content. I don't know what my niche is. I'm just making content because I like doing it. I like filming things, even though it was blistering hot today. And definitely like this video, share this video, comment if you have any questions, and let me know what other sort of furniture projects you want me to build. The only other thing I've built here are some smaller sort of bookshelves and one behemoth of a table that probably weighs close to 80 kilos or something kind of ridiculous. So yeah, thanks again for watching, and hope you enjoyed.